Hi there. So you're not led astray, let me warn you right from the outset. This video is only for people who purchased my book, The Complete Guide to the OM System OM-1. It's clearly not for everybody and might just bore the pants off you anyway. I'm Tony Phillips, author of many books on Olympus, OM, Fujifilm and other cameras. I recently completed a book on the OM-1 camera, and during the development of that project I toyed with the idea of creating videos to run through each of the menu items. I wanted to explain how they each functioned and what the interdependencies are. I was really hoping that that might lead to releasing content faster than writing a book, because it takes quite a long time, months. But that didn't work out. It takes far too long editing videos, and that process isn't fun at all by a long way. Anyway, to test the idea, I recorded the following video presenting just 16 menu items that I recommend in chapter 2 of the book as an initial configuration. Kind of a way to get going with the best setup as fast as possible. So here it is. Take it for what it's worth.
Whenever I receive a new camera, there's a group of things that I usually do, and I thought I'd share some of these with you with regard to the OM-1. With the OM-1, you have some choices in aspect ratio that are a little different from some other cameras. The native aspect ratio is 4:3. Now, I always elect for 3:2. This is the most common aspect ratio used in photography. But since I almost always shoot this camera in large, superfine JPEG plus RAW, it means that I retain the 4:3 aspect ratio if I want. I can also reprocess that image in the camera. I don't lose the 4:3. I just prefer the 3:2 so that I'm not including something in the composition that might be above or below once it's cropped for 3:2 aspect ratio. Another setting which I changed is the detail settings for JPEGs. You can see here that I've elected to have all 4 slots as large superfine. I don't use this camera to do medium or low res shots for, say, social media or something like that. I really only use it for high end. So I have no need for any of the other settings at all, which are various mediums and small. So I like to have my images as large as possible with the highest possible quality. I really wish I could disable slots 2, 3 and 4, and you will see why in just a moment. Having set the detail settings, now you can come up and select what you're actually going to use to shoot with. You can see here that the first option is RAW, but then here are my 4 large superfine settings, and then here is the combination of large, superfine and RAW, and this is what I elect to use here. So let me just jump out and show you what that looks like in the SCP. Here are the 2 memory card slots in the SCP, and if you roll the front dial, you get to scroll through all of the choices that you saw in the previous setting. I choose large superfine, but if I keep rolling, I just basically get 4 versions of that, which is why I wish I could disable it. Now, if you look at my SCP here, you'll see that one of these card slots is grayed out. That's because I'm using this option for my dual cards, which is backup, and we'll come to that in a moment. In shooting menu 1 on tab 2, there is an option to keep warm color for auto white balance. The default is on, which means that the colors are artificially warmed, and I elect to turn this off. I really don't want the camera doing that for me. In shooting menu 1 tab 5 under spot metering, I elect to select spot here. What that does is locks the spot metering to the same location as the AF target, meaning that metering will be performed wherever it is that I place the AF target in the composition. In shooting menu 1, tab 8, is the image stabilization options. I select SIS Auto for still image shooting. This is where the camera automatically chooses what kind of stabilization to apply. You can turn it off here, of course, SIS Auto, and then there are 3 other options. SIS1 means that stabilization functions in all directions, which is what SIS Auto usually chooses. SIS2 means that you only get vertical stabilization, and SIS3 is horizontal stabilization only. My choice here is SIS Auto. In the AF menu on tab 1, under Release Priority, for SAF autofocus, I select to have Release Priority on. Release Priority means that the camera will shoot immediately when I press the shutter button to take the capture. If I choose to have this off, it means that the camera will wait until it has focus before it takes the picture. For all the continuous autofocus modes, I prefer to have that off for focus accuracy. In the AF menu on tab 6, for the MF Assist options, I leave Magnify off. What Magnify on does is to magnify the image as soon as you rotate the focus ring. I don't really like that because the image jumps up, but I know some people really appreciate that. I select to have focus peaking on and the focus indicator, which is just the flashing light on the bottom. Then in peaking settings straight underneath that, you select a peaking color. These options are really applicable for the color of the composition that you're working with. And then highlight intensity will depend too on how much contrast there is in the image. Here I've got it set for low, and I'll show you why in a second. There are low, normal, and high, and these basically give you a higher indication for the amount of contrast that you have in the image. So if there was very low contrast, then you might select high, and if there's a lot of contrast, then you might select low. So let me show you what happens when you select high. There's about a meter or 3 feet between the camera and the background, and this would indicate that they're both in focus. So that's not terribly accurate. If we go in and switch that intensity to low, and then we do this again, so we have the background, and then we move it, and you can see that the camera itself is coming into focus. So that's more accurate for this kind of situation. Normally, I would keep this on normal, which is really just splitting the difference between the two options of having low and high contrast, and then select it as you require. All right, let's switch to the Operations menu and Priority Set, which is on the second tab. I select Yes for Priority Set. Think of this as an expert mode. Do you want dialog boxes to highlight No or Yes? I like it to highlight Yes, so Priority Set, I select Yes. Also on tab 2 of the Operations menu is the menu cursor settings. The first of these is the page cursor position, and I prefer to have this on save. What this really does is it saves the position for every single page of the menu that you visit. So when you go back to that page, that item's automatically highlighted. You've seen that as we've gone through this video. The second item is the menu start position, and this selects where you want the menu to open when you visit it the next. There are 3 options. Recently means that it'll open on the last page that you visited. This camera 1 means that it will go to the beginning of the menu, to the shooting menu 1, tab 1 every time. And My means that it will open in My Menu. If you've populated My Menu, you might actually prefer this option. In the midst of writing a book, recently suits me just fine. Then shortcut to B mode settings, on. What this does is that when you're shooting in bulb mode, pressing the menu button jumps to the bulb settings rather than into the menu. Off means that it will do whatever it was you selected in the previous option we just looked at. Also in the Operations menu on tab 1 is button settings. So this is where you select all the function button settings for stills and for video. And you press OK to go in and alter each of these. I have a substantial section in the book which goes through all the options. Right, let's look in the Tools menu. The first item I'll cover is the file name. I set this to auto to retain the file and folder numbering when a fresh memory card is plugged into the camera. Reset will start from 0, which means that you will have duplicate file names. Another file name thing that I like to do is to manually change the name of the files from the camera default. OM-1 in this case, and then A. By changing it to this, it means that I have more unique names. I leave it on A until I shoot off the first 9999, so the first 10,000 images, then change it to B. So in that way I have 260,000 unique file names for this camera before I need to change how this is functioning. Also in the Tools menu on tab 2 is copyright information. First of all, you need to turn this on, which I've already done. And then you can enter in both the artist's name and a copyright name. Copyright name might apply to images that were taken for a business or some other copyright holder. That information is stored in the ERXF data. The last of these settings that I'll look at now is the card slot settings. The setting which I'm using here is backup, which means that when an image is captured, it's saved to both memory cards. And then if one card becomes full, it will still keep saving images to the second memory card. This is the same, except that if one memory card becomes full, then it stops saving images. There are a number of other options here. My preference is to back up images as I save them, which means both JPEG and RAW are saved to each memory card. This dual independent option and this dual independent option allow you to specify saving JPEG images to one memory card and RAW images to another. So that's it for a quick roundup of some essential configuration items. I hope that will make your camera function for you a little better right from the get-go.
Did you survive that? Good for you. I hope you learned something. I have a few other videos in the pipeline, so stay tuned here if you want something informative and hopefully a little lighter. That's it for me. See ya.